Hello and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. If you've never been here before, my name is Rory and you are watching Varietal Literature's YouTube page, a cozy little corner of the internet for narrative. And if you are watching this live, you should know that there is a live chat where a little crop of potatoes is growing and they're already discussing things. And if you want to discuss the stories as we go along or offer your thoughts to me or the others in the group, go right ahead, join that live chat. If you're not watching live, though, down in the description below, there will be a timestamps for the two stories we're reading tonight, both of which eventually come to concern something about a Baba Yaga, which we'll talk about in a moment. All right. Whoop. Just a moment while I say hello to my chat. I see that Uncle Kitty's surgery went well, and I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you for keeping us updated, Uncle Kitty. For the reasons of a research paper that I did in the course of my degree, I know a weird amount about what exactly is happening there. I was, without going into depth about it, I was looking into optogenetics and as an alternative method for the sort of electric stimulus that you're getting there, the device. I think there were obviously issues because that was, 15 years ago and it's still not standard practice. So, but at the time it looked promising. Anyways, I do hope that it proves beneficial for you because I know it has its drawbacks. And I see GS, I see Tammy's feeling better. I'm glad that your headache has gone away, Tammy. Jum Store has some doctor's appointments in the morning. Don't they know? Don't your doctors know that my stream is happening? It seems a little rude of your doctor. I kid. And the snacks we were discussing last week were a hit, and I'm glad to hear that. I also see Lizzie Rose is here, and Janera's here. Lovely to see you, Janera. I did end up seeing the paperclip video a little while after you'd mentioned it, and I appreciate it more. Yeah, Lizzie Rose says, I'm starting to lose track of who has what surgery or medical problem. Lizzie says, what's your degree in, Rory? It was a double major in philosophy and psychology. On the psychology side, which is relevant to what I just said, the two areas that interested me the most was behaviorism, and it sort of branches out from that, group dynamics, things like that, and neurobiology. On the philosophy side, I was keen on continentals, which probably isn't a terribly big surprise if you've watched me for a while. Jumpstore says, I know, Rory, the audacity of it. Yeah, Janera says, yes, Clippy would never sell your personal data. He just wants to help. Indeed. Okay, well, let's do as we did last time. Let's get some creepy thunder in the background here. Lizzie Rose says, ooh, interesting. I mean, that really depends. Can make you pretty. Those two topics can make you pretty insufferable at the right conversation. Right. What are we talking about tonight? Okay. I won't spend too long on it because it's not a complicated concept to wrap your head around. But we're talking about Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is a Russian what's the word I'm looking for here? A Russian hag, if you will. I was going to say witch, but that doesn't quite capture it. I mean, in folklore, hags and witches are generally pretty interchangeable, but I don't think they're 100% interchangeable. There are helpful, or what I would call like more neutral witches that come up, which could just be a healer in folklore, which is probably what they were in real life, to be honest. But in this case, what we're really looking at is more hag. The idea that if it's a person, it's barely a person anymore. They almost are different creatures. In the case of Baba Yaga, there's a lot of I mean, to my mind, there's a lot that doesn't cross over, but there's a lot of crossover between Baba Yaga and the Wendigo. In the sense that they both are sort of these lurking creatures in the woods, and they both are cannibals. That's kind of the big thing. The thing about the Wendigo, though, is, as I understand it in most traditions, it's a thing that happens to a person who made a terrible choice. Whereas Baba Yaga is very much represented as, like, their own creature, which is always an interesting prospect to me, because they are painted as a horrible evil in the world, because they eat people. But if they are a different creature, then what's the difference between them and like a wolf or a lion? I mean, I'm sure there are differences, but it's a prospect that is maybe more just an interesting thought experiment. But it could be the case, and probably is the case, that Baba Yaga was, like most hags and witches in lore, somebody who at some point was in league with the devil to get their powers, and they do terrible, horrible things. That said... Lizzie Rose says, never would have thought about Baba Yaga and Wendigo as similar before. I mean, that's just my own impression. I could be way off on that assessment. I don't know if I'm ready to like write a grad paper on that concept, but there is crossover there. With the Wendigo, the idea is usually, as I understood it, it was a person who resorted to cannibalism, usually of their own children, and in doing so was sort of driven into this distorted creature who now craved human flesh. And that doesn't seem to be implied at all by the by Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga is more so treated as a kind of independent creature. Lizzie Rose says, hey now, Baba Yaga is not all evil. She helps as much or more as she hurts. Well, we'll see. So far, none of the stories I have tonight, she's all that helpful. Lizzie Rose also adds that she thinks of her as a primeval goddess, fairy godmother, and evil witch all in one. I think there's definitely room for that, for sure. But iconic. You know, iconic. So we're going to read two tales here. The first one is a lot more specifically about Baba Yaga. Not entirely, though. Baba Yaga is rarely the star of the story. The story that we read last week, the Baba Yaga story we read last week, was kind of the star of that tale. It was just about Baba Yaga in many ways. These stories are about sort of adventures with people where Baba Yaga becomes to factor in at some point. The first story here doesn't do anything too horrible and questionable, as long as you understand that the ever-present threat of her is that she eats people. The second story is absolutely balls to the wall lunacy. It's a long story. I'm choosing to read it. Baba Yaga comes into the later half of it. It is at every turn madness. Which I know I say a lot, but I promise you this one is a standout. Janera says, she's the crazy cat lady who lives in the woods. It's not a bad way to put it. Like all things with the, folklore characters, it really depends on how the story... It really depends on the story. Sometimes creatures that are supposed to be scary in all other stories become very helpful. There's stories where trolls are very helpful in, like, Icelandic lore, and then the other times they're very dangerous and to be slain, so, like, it goes back and forth. Okay, now I'm rambling. We have a lot of story to get through. It's 2 stories, but they're both on the longer side. So... let's get to it. I did try to look up how to say this name, but I didn't really find much guidance. I think it's Vasilissa? Vasilissa? Our first tale of the night is Vasilissa the Fair, and it comes to us from a collection called Russian Fairy Tales, a choice collection of Muscovite folklore. This is a book from, I think, around the turn of the century, and you can find it for free on Project Gutenberg. We read it last week, and all our stories tonight also come from here. In a certain kingdom, there lived a merchant. 12 years did he live as a married man, but he had only one child, Vasilissa the Fair. When her mother died, the girl was 8 years old, and on her deathbed the merchant's wife called her little daughter to her and took out from under the bedclothes a doll, gave it to her daughter, and said, "Listen, Vasilissa, dear, remember and obey these last words of mine. I am going to die. And now, together with my parental blessing, I bequeath to you this doll. Keep it always by you. And never show it to anybody. And whenever any misfortune comes upon you, give the doll food and ask its advice. And when it has fed, it will tell you a cure for your troubles." And then the mother kissed her child and died. After his wife's death, the merchant mourned for her a befitting time, and then began to consider about marrying again. He was a man of means. It wasn't a question with him of girls with dowries. More than all the others, a certain widow took his fancy. She was middle-aged, had a couple of daughters of her own, just about the same age as Vasilissa. She must needs be both a good housekeeper and an experienced mother. Well, the merchant married the widow, but he had deceived himself, for he did not find in her a kind mother for his Vasilissa. Vasilissa was the prettiest girl in all the village, but her stepmother and stepsisters were jealous of her beauty and tormented her with every possible toil in order that she might grow thin from overwork and be tanned by the sun and the wind. Her life was made a burden to her. Now, I think most people in my chat know this, but in case you're lurking and you're just not very familiar, I do want to pause on what the implication of what that sentence is saying. She's the prettiest girl in the world. A lot of what would have made her pretty is that she didn't look like she worked fields, right? This isn't a foreign idea to a modern crowd even, but it means she was pale and soft-skinned, like she's not out in the sun. She doesn't get, a lot of exercise working farm tools. These were desirable traits. So what they're saying is she's so pretty that the mother is trying to ugly her up by making her do a bunch of farm work. Vasilissa bore everything with resignation, and every day grew plumper and prettier, while the stepmother and her daughters lost flesh and fell off in appearance from the effects of their own spite, notwithstanding that they always sat with folded hands like fine ladies. By the way, ladies do not fare well in either of these stories, so I apologize ahead of time for the ethos of this particular collector. But how did that come about? Why, it was her doll that helped Vasilissa. If it hadn't been for it, however, could the girl have got through all her work, and therefore it was that Vasilissa would never eat all her share of a meal, but always kept the most delicate morsel for her doll. And at night, when all were at rest, she would shut herself up in the narrow chamber in which she slept, and feast her doll, saying the while, "There, dolly, feed, help me in my need. I live in my father's house, but never know what pleasure is. My evil stepmother tries to drive me out of the white world. Teach me how to keep alive, and what I ought to do." Then the doll would eat, and afterwards give her advice, and comfort her in her sorrow. And the next day it would do all of Vasilissa's work for her. She had only to take her ease in a shady place and pluck flowers, and yet all her work was done in good time. The beds were weeded, the pails were filled, and the cabbages were watered, and the stove was heated. Moreover, the doll showed Vasilissa herbs which prevented her from getting sunburnt. Happily did she and her doll live together. Several years went by. Vasilissa grew up and became old enough to be married. All the marriageable young men in town sent to make an offer to Vasilissa. At her stepmother's daughters, not a soul would so much as look. Her stepmother grew even more savage than before and replied to every suitor, "We won't let the younger marry before her elders." And after the suitors had been packed off, she used to beat Vasilissa by way of wreaking her spite. Well, it happened one day that the merchant had to go away from home on business for a long time. Thereupon, the stepmother went to live in another house, and near that house was a dense forest. And in a clearing in that forest there stood a hut, and in the hut there lived a Baba Yaga. She never let anyone come near her dwelling, and she ate up people like so many chickens. Having moved into the new abode, the merchant's wife kept sending her hated Vasilissa into the forest on one pretense or another. But the girl always got home safe and sound. The doll used to show her the way and never let her go near the Baba Yaga's dwelling. Well, the autumn season arrived. One evening, the stepmother gave out their work to the three girls. I'm just going to tell you ahead again time that this little sequence that they describe here is undeniably a bit confusing. One she set to lace making, another to knitting socks, and the third, Vasilissa, to weaving, and each one of them had their allotted amount to do. By and by she put out the lights in the house, leaving only one candle alight where the girls were working, and then she went to bed. The girls worked and worked. Presently the candle wanted snuffing, and one of the daughters took out the snuffer as if she was going to clear the wick. But instead of doing so, in obedience to her mother's orders, she snuffed the candle out, pretending to do so by accident. "What now shall we do?" said the girls. "There isn't a spark of fire in the house, and our tasks are not yet done. We must go to the Baba Yaga's for a light." "My pins give me light enough," said the one who was making lace. "I shan't go." "Well, I shan't go either," said the one who was knitting socks. "My knitting needles give me light enough." "Vasilissa, you must go for the light," they both cried out together. "Be off to the Baba Yaga's." And they pushed Vasilissa out of the room. No, I don't know what's implied, other than absurdity, by the fact that they say that their pins and knitting needles will give them light. I don't know. Theories in chat. Vasilissa went into her little closet and set before the doll a supper which she provided beforehand, and said, "Now dully feed and listen to my need. I'm sent to the Baba Yaga's for a light. The Baba Yaga will eat me." The doll fed, and its eyes began to glow like a couple of candles. "Never fear, Vasilissa, dear," it said. "Go where you're sent. Only take care to keep me always by you. As long as I'm with you, no harm will come to you at the Baba Yaga's." So Vasilissa got ready, put her doll in her pocket, crossed herself, and went out into the thick forest. And as she walks, she trembles. Suddenly, a horseman gallops by. He is white, and he is dressed in white, and under him is a white horse, and the trappings of the horse are white, and the day begins to break. She goes a little farther, and a second rider gallops by. He is red, dressed in red, and sitting on a red horse, and the sun rises. Vasilissa went on walking all night and all next day. It was only towards the evening that she reached the clearing on which stood the dwellings of the Baba Yaga. And the fence around it was made of dead men's bones. On the top of the fence were stuck human skulls with eyes in them. Instead of uprights at the gates, there were men's legs. Instead of bolts, there were arms. Instead of a lock, was a mouth with sharp teeth. Yeah, that was the best guess I had. The chat is saying that moonlight might be reflecting off their needles is the point. It's either that or like they're just openly being absurd so that it's obvious that they're trying to kill her. Gia says that's a heck of a long trip for a little light. I agree. I'll be the first to admit that it's hard to light something by rubbing sticks together, but not impossible. And it seems like it couldn't have been harder than this. All right. Vasilissa was frightened out of her wits and stood still as if rooted to the ground. And suddenly there rode past another horseman. He was black, dressed all in black, and on a black horse. He galloped up to the Baba Yaga's gate and disappeared just as if he'd sunk through the ground. And night fell. But the darkness did not last long. The eyes of all the skulls on the fence began to shine, and the whole clearing became as bright as if it had been midday. Vasilissa shuddered with fear, but stopped where she was, not knowing which way to run. This is probably my favorite description of the Baba Yaga lairs that I found in this book. It's a lot of the reason I chose to read this one. What a cool place. Soon there was heard in the forest a terrible roar. And the trees cracked, and the dry leaves rustled, and out of the forest came the Baba Yaga, riding in her mortar, urging it on with a pestle, sweeping away her traces with a broom. Up she drove to the gate, stopped short, and snuffing the air around her, cried, "Fa! Fa! I smell Russian flesh. Who's there?" Vasilissa went up to the hag in a terrible fright, bowed low before her, and said, "It's me, Granny. My stepsisters have sent me to you for a light." "Very good," said the Baba Yaga. "I know them. If you'll stop a while with me first, do some work for me, I'll give you a light. But if you won't, I'll eat you." Then she turned to the gates and cried, "Ho! Thou firm fence of mine, be thou divided, and ye wide gates of mine, do ye fly open." The gates opened, and the Baba Yaga drove in, whistling as she went. and after her followed Vasilissa, and then everything shut to again. And when they entered the sitting room, the Baba Yaga stretched herself out at full length and said to Vasilissa,
"Fetch out what there is in the oven. I'm hungry."
Vasilissa lighted a splinter at one of the skulls which were on the fence and began fetching meat from the oven and setting it before the Baba Yaga. And the meat enough had been provided for 12 people. And then she fetched from the cellar kvass, mead, beer, and wine. The hag ate up everything, drank up everything. All she left for Vasilissa was a few scraps, a crust of bread, and a morsel of sucking pig. I don't know if that was pig, though, girl. I don't know if I would be eating meat that the Baba Yaga had cooking, personally. But, she made her choices. Then the Baba Yaga lay down to sleep, saying,
"When I go out tomorrow morning, mind you, cleanse the courtyard, sweep the room, cook the dinner, and get the linen ready. Then go to the corn bin, take out 4 quarters of wheat and clear it of other seed, and mind you have it all done. If you don't, I shall eat you."
After giving these orders, the Baba Yaga began to snore. But Vasilissa set the remnants of the hag's supper before her doll, burst into tears, and said, "Dolly, feed! Listen to my need! The Baba Yaga set me a heavy task and threatens to eat me if I don't do it all! Do help me!" The doll replied, "Never fear, Vasilissa the fair. Sup, say your prayers. Go to bed. The morning is wiser than the evening." Vasilissa awoke very early, but the Baba Yaga was already up. She looked out the window. The light in the skull's eyes was going out, and all of a sudden there appeared again the white horseman, and all was light. The Baba Yaga went out into the courtyard and whistled. Before her appeared a mortar with a pestle and a broom. The red horseman appeared as the sun rose. The Baba Yaga seated herself in the mortar and drove out of the courtyard, shooting herself along with the pestle, sweeping away her traces with the broom. Vasilissa was left alone, so she examined the Baba Yaga's house, wondered at the abundance there was in everything, and remained lost in thought as to which work she ought to take first. She looked up. All her work was done already. The doll had cleared the wheat to the very last grain. "Ah, my preserver!" cried Vasilissa. "You've saved me from danger." "All you've got to do now is to cook the dinner," slipping into Vasilissa's pocket. "Cook away, in God's name, and then take some rest for your health's sake." Towards evening, Vasilissa got the table ready and awaited the Baba Yaga. It began to grow dusky. The black rider appeared for a moment at the gate, and all grew dark. The leaves began to rustle up, and up drove the Baba Yaga. Vasilissa went out to meet her.
"Is everything done?"
asks the Yaga. "Please, look for yourself, Granny," says Vasilissa. The Baba Yaga examined everything and was vexed that there was nothing to be angry about, and said,
Well, very good."
Afterwards she cried,
"My trusty servants, zealous friends, grind this my wheat,
and there appeared 3 pairs of hands, which gathered up the wheat and carried it out of sight. The Baba Yaga supped, went to bed, and again gave her orders to Vasilissa.
Do just the same tomorrow as today. Only besides that, take out of the bin the poppy seed that is there. Clean off the earth of every grain by grain. Someone or another, you see, has mixed a lot of earth with it out of spite.
Having said this, the hag turned to the wall and began to snore. And Vasilissa took to feeding her doll. The doll fed and then said to her what it said the day before. Pray to God and go to sleep. The morning is wiser than the evening. All shall be done, Vasilissa, my dear. GS says all this for a light. Yeah, I know. The next morning, the Baba Yaga again drove out of the courtyard in her mortar, and Vasilissa and her doll immediately did all the work. The hag returned, looked at everything, and cried,
My trusty servants, zealous friends, press forth oil from the poppy seeds.
And 3 pairs of hands appeared, gathered up the poppy seed, and bore it out of sight. The Baba Yaga sat down to dinner. She ate, but Vasilissa stood silently by.
Why, don't you speak to me, said the Baba Yaga. There you stand like a dumb creature.
I didn't dare, answered Vasilissa. But if you give me leave, I should like to ask you about something.
Ask away. Only it isn't every question that brings good. Get much to know, and old soon you'll grow.
I only wanted to ask you, Granny, about something I saw. As I was coming here, I was passed by one riding on a white horse. He was white himself and dressed in white. Who was he?
That was my bright day,
answered the Baba Yaga. Afterwards there passed me another rider. This on a red horse, red himself and all in red clothes. Who was he?
That was my red son,
answered the Baba Yaga. And who may be the black rider, Granny, who passed by me just at your gate?
That was my dark night. They're all trusty servants of mine.
Vasilissa thought of the 3 pairs of hands, but held her peace.
Why don't you go on asking, said the Baba Yaga.
That's enough for me, Granny. You said it yourself. Get much to know, too much to know, and old you'll grow.
Just as well, said the Baba Yaga, that you've only asked about what you saw out of doors, not indoors. In my house, I hate having dirt carried out of doors. And so, as to over-inquisitive people, well, I eat them. Now I'll ask you something. How is it you managed to do the work I set you to do?
My mother's blessing assists me, replied Vasilissa.
What's that? Get along out of my house, you blessed daughter. I don't want blessed people.
She dragged Vasilissa out of the room, pushed her outside the gates, took one of the skulls with blazing eyes from the fence, stuck it on a stick, and gave it to her and said,
Lay hold of that. It's a light you can take to your stepsisters. That's what they sent you here for, I believe.
And home went Vasilissa at a run, lit by the skull which went out only at the approach of dawn, and at last on the evening of the 2nd day she reached home. When she came to the gate, she was going to throw away the skull. Surely, thinks she, they can't still be in want of a light at home. But suddenly a hollow voice issued from the skull, saying, "Throw me not away. Carry me to your stepmother." So she looked at her stepmother's house, and not seeing a light in a single window, she determined to take the skull in there with her. For the first time in her life, she was cordially received by her stepmother and stepsisters, who told her from that moment she went away they hadn't had a spark of fire in the house. They couldn't strike a light themselves anyhow. And whenever they brought one in from a neighbor's, it went out as soon as it came into the room. "Perhaps your light will keep in," said the stepmother, so they carried the skull into the sitting room. But the eyes of the skull so glared at the stepmother and her daughters, shot forth such flames, they would fain have hidden themselves, but run where they would, everywhere did the eyes follow after them, and by morning they were utterly burnt to cinders. Only Vasilissa was none the worse. Now, keeping in mind that this is a collection, for whatever reason, the collector chose not to publish the whole tale. So instead, he gives a summary here, which I'm going to read, of the rest of the tale. Even though we've sort of read the probably main part of it. By the way, I'm open to interpretation, but my interpretation is of what just occurred. Is the stepmother had a deal to send some food, basically, to Baba Yaga, but failed to notify the Baba Yaga that she was wasting her time on a blessed child. And so the Baba Yaga sent her back with something to kill her stepmother for wasting her time. That's my guess. But here's the summary of the rest of, apparently, the tale. Next morning, Vasilissa buried the skull, locked up the house, and took up her quarters in a neighboring town. After a time, she began to work. Her doll made a glorious loom, and by the end of the winter, she had weaved a quantity of linen so fine that it might be passed like thread through the eye of a needle. In the spring, after it had been bleached, Vasilissa made a present of it to the old woman with whom she lodged. The crone presented it to the king, who ordered it to be made into shirts. But no seamstress could be found to make them up until the linen was entrusted to Vasilissa. When a dozen shirts were ready, Vasilissa sent them to the king, and as soon as her carrier had started, she washed herself and combed her hair and dressed herself and sat down at the window. Before long, there arrived a messenger demanding her instant appearance at the court. And when she appeared before the royal eyes, the king fell desperately in love with her. "No, my beauty," said he, "never will I part with thee. Thou shalt be my wife." So he married her, and by the by her father returned and took up his abode with her, and Vasilissa took the old woman into her service, and as for the doll, to the end of her life she always carried it in her pocket. All right. That's story one. As you can see, not a short story for us, but it's not as long as the second one. Which is here. Gotta remember where it is in here. There it is. All right. Tammy says, "Sorry, I had to take my puppers out, but I've been listening. But now I'm back on. Good." So I suppose to Lizzie Rose's point, you know, the Baba Yaga is ultimately helpful in this story, but she certainly didn't set out or end up being helpful because she intended to be. But she's also not like a rabid monster, exactly. That said, it does vary how she gets represented. This story, which is bonkers. I'm going to talk a little bit about how bonkers this story is. It takes so many wild turns. This story's cut from a different cloth. Part of the reason I've included it in the Baba Yaga, even though the Baba Yaga doesn't really even come into it until near the end, is because it has one of the most disturbing features of Baba Yaga in it. And I felt like to really sort of capture... Because I think even if you don't know a ton about Baba Yaga, if you're at least have a cursory familiarity of her, you're aware of the she tries to eat people thing. But that's not unusual in folklore, right? There's more that she's said to do. And this story covers one of it, which is horrifying. So yes, I know I say this a lot, but honestly, this might be it. This might be the most unhinged folklore epic I've ever found. I mean, that's a bold statement. Maybe it's not true, but it definitely hit me that way as I read it. I couldn't think of another one. And as I mentioned, though the Baba Yaga makes a sort of late and more brief appearance in this tale, is less the core of it than the last one, it's one of the most disturbing portrayals of her in the book, or that I've heard in general. There are people in here that they refer to as the heroes, and I think part of the reason they've decided to refer to them as heroes is because I don't think you would know they were the heroes of the story unless you were told. There's not a good person in this tale, but there are people that clearly we're supposed to think are good, despite all the evidence to the contrary. This is a story of terrible people being lazy and mean and cruel and gruesome. It's a very disturbing story at multiple points for multiple reasons. And what makes it more disturbing is that it clearly doesn't think it's disturbing a lot of what it's describing. So, that's your content warning. Gruesome stuff happens frequently in this story, even though the story doesn't seem to think what it's describing is really that gruesome. And there's no one to like in this story by the end, in my opinion. It is a long tale, so I suspect we will probably go quite late tonight. Our next tale is called The Blind Man and the Cripple. It comes to us from the Russian Fairy Tales, a choice collection of Muscovite folklore. It is disturbing. It involves a lot of gruesome violence towards all sorts of things for all sorts of reasons. Content warning for you. This is not for kids. In a certain kingdom, there lived a king and queen. They had a son, Prince Ivan. And to look after that son was appointed a tutor named Kotoma. The king and queen lived to a great age, but then they fell ill and despaired of ever recovering. So they sent for Prince Ivan and strictly enjoined him. "When we are dead, do you in everything respect and obey Kotoma. If you obey him, you will prosper, but if you choose to be disobedient, you will perish like a fly." The next day, the king and queen died. Prince Ivan buried his parents and took to living according to their instructions. Whatever he had to do, he always consulted his tutor about it. Some time passed by. The prince attained to man's estate and began to think about getting married. So one day he went to his tutor and said, "Kotoma, I'm tired of living alone. I want to marry." "Well, prince, what's to prevent you? You're of an age at which it's time to think about a bride. Go into the great hall. There's a collection there of the portraits of all the princesses in the world. Look at them, choose for yourself whichever pleases you. To her, send a proposal of marriage." By the way, as absurd as that sounds, I wonder if that's a real thing. Is there any history buffs know that? Was it a thing to just sort of send paintings of your daughter around various kingdoms and see if anyone showed up? That seems like a thing that might have actually happened. Prince Ivan went into the Great Hall, and began examining the portraits. And the one that pleased him best was that of the Princess Anna the Fair. Such a beauty, and the like of her wasn't to be found in the whole world. Underneath her portrait were written these words: "If anyone asks her a riddle, and she does not guess it, him shall she marry. But he whose riddle she guesses shall have his head chopped off." Also, you'll probably notice, it's worth noticing, that this story also starts with the parents dying and giving some passing advice about always listen to this thing. In the other one, it was a doll. In this one, it's the tutor. And second of all, that the woman in the tale is called Blank the Fair. I don't have anything more to say other than those interesting connections. Prince Ivan read this inscription and became greatly afflicted and went off to his tutor. "I've been in the great hall," says he, "and I picked out for my bride Anna the Fair. Only I don't know whether it's possible to win her." "Yes, Prince, she's hard to get. If you go alone, you won't win her anyhow. But if you will take me with you, and if you will do what I tell you, perhaps the affair can be managed." Prince Ivan begged Katoma to go with him and gave his word of honor to obey him, whether in joy or grief. Well, they got ready for the journey and set off to sue for the hands of Princess Anna the Fair. They traveled for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and traversed many countries. Says Prince Ivan, "We've been traveling all this time, uncle, and now we're approaching the country of Princess Anna the Fair, and yet we don't know what riddle to propound." Lizzie Rose says, "I don't know about sending portraits around, but royals did ask for portraits of prospective spouses." Okay. That is good to know. Yeah, it seemed like a thing that must happen on some respect. "We shall manage to think of one in good time," replied Katoma. Then they went a little further. Katoma was looking down the road, and on it lay a purse full of money. He lifted it up directly, poured all the money out of it into his own purse, and said, "Here's a riddle for you, Prince Ivan. When you come into the presence of the princess, propound a riddle to her in these words: As we were coming along, we saw good lying on the road, and we took up the good with good, and placed it in our own good. That riddle she won't guess in a lifetime, but any other one she would find out directly. She would have only had to look in her magic book, and as soon as she guessed it, she'd order your head to be cut off." Now, if you're wondering what the hell does that mean, I don't know. Good luck. I have no idea. Makes basically no sense. A lot of the riddles in these old stories are not what I would understand to be a riddle. So, I don't know. Make your own peace with it. Well, at last, Prince Ivan and his tutor arrived at the lofty palace which lived the fair princess. At that moment she happened to be out on the balcony, and when she saw the newcomers, she sent out to know whence they came and what they wanted. Prince Ivan replied, "I have come from such and such a kingdom, and I wish to sue for the hand of Princess Anna the Fair." When she was informed of this, the princess gave orders that the prince should enter the palace, and there, in the presence of all the princes and boyars of her council, should propound his riddle. "I've made this compact," she said. "Anyone whose riddle I cannot guess, him I must marry. But anyone whose riddle I can guess, him I may put to death." "Listen to my riddle, fair princess," said Prince Ivan. "As we came along, we saw good lying on the road. We took up the good with good, and placed it in our own good." Princess Anna the Fair took her magic book and began turning over its leaves, examining the answers of riddles. She went right through the book, but she didn't get at the meaning she wanted, and thereupon the princes and boyars of her council decided that the princess must marry Prince Ivan. She wasn't at all pleased, but there was no help for it, and so she began to get ready for the wedding. Meanwhile, She considered within herself how she could spin out the time and do away with the bridegroom, and she thought the best way would be to overwhelm him with tremendous tasks. So she called Prince Ivan and said to him, "Oh, my dear Prince Ivan, my destined husband, it is meet that we should prepare for the wedding. Pray do me this small service. On such and such a spot of my kingdom there stands a lofty iron pillar. Carry it into the palace kitchen and chop it up into small chunks by way of fuel for the cook." "Excuse me, princess," replied the prince. "Was it to chop fuel that I came here? Is that the sort of proper employment for me? I have a servant for that kind of thing, Katoma Diadka of the Oakenshopka." The prince straightway called for his tutor and ordered him to drag the iron pillar into the kitchen and to chop it into small chunks by way of the fuel for the cook. Katoma went to the spot indicated by the princess, seized the pillar in his arms, and brought it into the palace kitchen and broke it into little pieces. But 4 of the iron chips he put into his pocket, saying, "They'll prove useful by and by." Next day, the princess says to Prince Ivan, "Oh, my dear princess, my destined husband, tomorrow we have to go to the wedding. I will drive in a carriage, but you should ride on a heroic steed. And it is necessary that you should break him in beforehand." "I break a horse myself. I keep a servant for that." Prince Ivan called Katoma and said, "Go into the stable and tell the grooms to bring forth the heroic steed. Sit upon him and break him in. Tomorrow I've got to ride him to the wedding." Katoma fathomed the subtle device of the princess, but without stopping long to talk, he went into the stable and told the grooms to bring forth the heroic steed. Now, there's nothing too graphic here, but as a warning, he's not going to be too kind to the horse. It lives, but if you're disturbed by that kind of stuff, I don't know, give it like 3 minutes. Mute the stream or something. 12 grooms were mustered. They unlocked 12 locks, opened 12 doors, and brought forth a magic horse bound in 12 chains of iron. Katoma went up to him. No sooner had he managed to seat himself than the magic horse leaped up from the ground and soared higher than the forest, higher than the standing forest, and lower than the flitting cloud. Firm sat Katoma, with one hand grasping the mane, and the other he took from his pocket an iron chunk, and began taming the horse with it between the ears, beating it. And when he had used up one chunk, he betook himself to another, and when 2 were used up, he took to a third, and when 3 were used up, a 4th came into play, and so grievously did he punish the heroic steed that it could not hold out any longer, but cried aloud with a human voice, "Batushka! Katoma! Don't utterly deprive me of life in the white world. Whatever you wish do, that you order. All shall be done according to your will." "Listen, no meat for dogs," answered Katoma. "Tomorrow Princess Ivan will ride you to the wedding. Now mind, when the grooms bring you out into the wide courtyard, and the prince goes up to you and lays his hand on you, do you stand quietly, not moving so much as an ear. And when he is seated on your back, do you sink into the earth right up to your fetlocks, and then move under him with a heavy step, just as if an immeasurable weight had been laid upon your back." Well, the heroic steed listened to the order and sank to earth, scarcely alive. Katoma seized him by the tail and flung him close to the stable, crying, "Ho there, coachmen and grooms! Carry off this dog's meat to its stall." Dog's meat is an insult that comes up a lot in this book. Makes me think it's an idiom from Russian language or something. The next day arrived. The time drew near for going to the wedding. The carriage was brought round for the princess and the heroic steed for Prince Ivan. The people were gathered together from all sides, a countless number. The bride and bridegroom came out from the white stone halls. The princess got into the carriage and waited to see what would become of Prince Ivan, whether the magic horse would fling his curls to the winds and scatter his bones across the open plain. Prince Ivan approached the horse, laid his hand upon its back, placed his foot in the stirrup, and the horse stood just as if petrified, didn't so much as wag an ear. The prince got on its back. The magic horse sank into the earth up to its fetlocks. The 12 chains were taken off the horse, and it began to move with an even and heavy pace while the sweat poured off it just like hail. "What a hero! What immeasurable strength!" cried the people as they gazed upon their prince. So the bride and bridegroom were married, and then they began to move out of the church, holding each other by the hand. The princess took it into her head to make one more trial of Prince Ivan, so she squeezed his hand so hard that he could not bear the pain. His face became suffused with blood. His eyes disappeared beneath his brows. "A fine sort of hero you are," thought the princess. "Your tutor has tricked me splendidly, but you shan't get off for nothing." What a great start to this marriage. Prince Anna the Fair lived for some time with Prince Ivan as a wife ought to live with a God-given husband. Flattered him in every way and words, but in reality never thought of anything except by what means she might get rid of Katoma. With the prince, without the tutor, there'd be no difficulty in settling matters, she said to herself. But whatever slanders she might invent, Prince Ivan would never allow himself to be influenced by what she said, but always felt sorry for his tutor. At the end of a year, he said to his wife one day, "Beauteous princess, my beloved spouse, I should like to go with you to my own kingdom." "By all means," replied she, "let us go. I myself have long been wishing to see your kingdom." Well, they got ready and went off. Katoma was allotted the post of coachman. They drove, and as they drove along, Prince Ivan went to sleep, and suddenly Prince Anna the Fair woke him, uttering loud complaints. "Listen, Prince, you're always sleeping. You hear nothing, but your tutor doesn't obey me a bit. He drives the horses on purpose over hill and dale, just as if he wanted to put an end to both of us. I tried speaking him fair, but he jeered at me. I won't go on living any longer if you don't punish him." Well, Prince Ivan, twixt sleeping and waking, waxed very wroth with his tutor and handed him over entirely to the princess, saying, "Deal with him as you please." The princess ordered his feet to be cut off. Katoma submitted patiently to the outrage. Things are going to get real weird here for a while. It just careens down a cliff of weird. Very good, he thinks. He who just had his feet cut off, by the way, is who's thinking this. "I shall suffer, it's true, but the prince also will know what to lead a wretched life is like." When both of Katoma's feet had been cut off, the princess glanced around and saw that a tall tree stump stood on one side. So she called her servants and ordered them to set him up on that stump. But as for Prince Ivan, she tied him to the carriage by a cord, turned the horses round, and drove back to her own kingdom. Katoma was left sitting on the stump, weeping bitter tears. "Farewell, Prince Ivan," he cries. "You won't forget me." Meanwhile, Prince Ivan was running and bounding behind the carriage. He knew well enough by this time what a blunder he'd made, but there was no turning back for him. When the Princess Anna the Fair arrived in her kingdom, she set Prince Ivan to take care of the cows, and every day he went afield with the herd at early morn, and in the evening he drove them back to the royal yard. At that hour the princess was always sitting on the balcony and looking out to see that the number of cows were all right. Katoma remained sitting on the stump 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, without anything to eat or drink. To get down was utterly impossible. It seemed as if he must die of starvation. But not far away from that place there was a dense forest, and in that forest was living a mighty hero who was quite blind. The only way by which he could get himself food was this. Whenever he perceived by the sense of smell that any animal was running past him, whether a hare or a fox or a bear, he immediately started in chase of it, caught it, and dinner was ready for him. The hero was exceedingly swift-footed, and there was not a single wild beast which could run away from him. Well, one day it fell out thus. A fox slunk past, the hero heard it, and was after it directly, and it ran up to the tall stump, and turned sharp off on one side, but the blind hero hurried on, took a spring, and thumped his forehead against the stump so hard that he knocked the stump out by the roots, and Katoma fell to the ground and asked, "Who are you?"
I am a blind hero. I've been living in the forest for 30 years. The only way I can get my food is this, to catch some game or other and cook it at a wood fire. If it had not been for that, I should have been starved to death long ago."
"You haven't been blind all your life."
"No, not all my life, but Princess Anna the Fair put my eyes out."
Before I continue, he's been in the forest for 30 years. How old is this princess? Was she putting out eyes as a baby?
"There now, brother," says Katoma. "And it's thanks to her, too, that I'm left here without any feet. She cut them both off, the accursed one."
The two heroes had a talk and agreed to live together and join in getting their food. The blind man says to the lame,
"Sit on my back and show me the way. I will serve you with my feet and you me with your eyes."
So he took the cripple and carried him home, and Katoma sat on his back, kept a look out all around, and cried out from time to time, "Right, left, straight on," and so forth. And while they lived some time in the forest in that way, and caught hares, foxes, and bears for their dinner, one day the cripple says, I know what's coming next. I need a drink of water. I think it's important that before I read this next section, you understand that the story believes that these people are the hero. "Surely we can never go on living all our lives without a soul to speak to. I've heard that in such and such a town there lives a rich merchant who has a daughter, and that merchant's daughter is exceedingly kind to the poor and crippled. She gives alms to everyone. Suppose we carry her off, brother, and let her live here and keep house for us." So the blind man took a cart, seated the cripple in it, and rattled it into town, straight into the rich merchant's courtyard. The merchant's daughter saw them out of the window and immediately ran out and came to give them alms. Approaching the cripple, she said, "Take this, in Christ's name, poor fellow." He seemed to be going to take the gift, but he seized her by the hand, pulling her into the cart, and called to the blind man, who ran off with it at such a pace that no one could catch him, even on horseback. The merchant sent people in pursuit, but no, they could not come up with him. The heroes brought the merchant's daughter into their forest hut and said to her, "Be in the place of a sister to us. Live here and keep house for us. Otherwise we poor sufferers will have no one to cook our meals or wash our shirts. God won't desert you if you do that." So just to be clear, they have full-on kidnapped a person, taken her to an isolated place and been like, "Look at how nice we are to let you clean for us." Anyways, carrying on, the merchant's daughter remained with them. The heroes respected her. Did they? Is this respect? Loved her and acknowledged her as a sister. The kind of sister you just kidnap, you know. They used to be out hunting all day, but their adopted sister was always at home. She looked after all the housekeeping, prepared the meals, and washed the linen. But after a time, a Baba Yaga took to haunting their hut and sucking the breasts of the merchant's daughter. No sooner have the heroes gone off to the chase than the Baba Yaga is there in a moment. Before long, the fair maiden's face began to fall away, and she grew weak and thin. The blind man could see nothing, but Katoma remarked that things weren't going well. He spoke about it to the blind man, and when they went together to their adopted sister and began questioning her. But the Baba Yaga had strictly forbidden her to tell the truth. For a long time, she was afraid to acquaint them with her trouble. For a long time, she held out, but at last her brothers talked her over and she told them everything without reserve. "Every time you go away to the chase," says she, "there immediately appears in the cottage a very old woman with a most evil face and long gray hair, and she sets me to dress her head, and meanwhile she sucks my breasts." Which is deeply disturbing, frankly. "Ah," says the blind man, "that's a Baba Yaga. Wait a bit. We must treat her after her own fashion. Tomorrow we won't go to the chase, but we'll try to entice her and lay hands upon her." "Now then, Uncle Footless," says the blind man, "you might get under the bench and lie there ever so still." Is Uncle Footless like a name he chose? Because I don't think he did. "I'll go into the yard and stand under the window. And as for you, sister, when the Baba Yaga comes and sits down just here, close by the window, and as you dress her hair, quietly separate the locks and throw them outside through the window. Just let me lay hold of her by those gray hairs of hers." Everyone in chat is grossed out, and that is the correct reaction. What was said was done. The blind man laid hold of the Baba Yaga by her gray hair and cried, "Who there, Uncle Katoma? Come out from under the bench and lay hold of this viper of a woman while I go into the hut." The Baba Yaga hears the bad news and tries to jump up to get her head free. "Where are you off to? That's no go, sure enough." She tugs and tugs, but cannot do herself any good. Just then, from under the bench, crawled Uncle Katoma, fell upon her like a mountain of stone, and took to strangling her until the heavens seemed to disappear. Then into the cottage bounded the blind man, crying to the cripple, "Now we must heap up a great pile of wood, and consume this accursed one with fire, and fling her ashes to the wind." The Baba Yaga began imploring them.
"My fathers, my darlings, forgive me. I will do all that is right."
"Very good, old witch. Then show us the fountain of healing and life-giving water," said the heroes. Reminder, apparently these are heroes.
"Only don't kill me. I'll show it to you directly."
Well, Katoma sat on the blind man's back, and the blind man took the Baba Yaga by her back hair, and she led them into the depths of the forest and brought them to a well and said,
"That is the water that kills, gives life."
"Look out, Uncle Katoma," cried the blind man. "Don't make a blunder. If she tricks us now, we shan't get right all our lives."
Katoma cut a green branch off a tree and flung it into the well, and the bow hadn't so much as reached the water before it all burst into flames.
"Ah! So you're still up to your tricks," said the heroes, and began to strangle the Baba Yaga with the intention of flinging her, the accursed one, into the fiery fount. More than ever did the Baba Yaga implore for mercy, swearing a great oath that she would not deceive them this time.
"On my troth, I will bring you to good water," says she.
While the heroes consented to give her one more trial, and she took them to another fount. Uncle Katoma cut a dry spray from a tree, and flung it into the fount. The spray had not yet reached the water when it already turned green. budded and put forth blossoms.
"Come now."
"That's good water," said Katoma. The blind man wetted his eyes with it and saw directly. He lowered the crippled into the water, and the lame man's feet grew again. And then they both rejoiced greatly and said to one another, "Now the time has come for us to get all right. We'll get everything back again we used to have. Only first we must make an end of the Baba Yaga. If we were to pardon her now, we should always be unlucky. She'd be scheming mischief all her life." And accordingly they went back to the fiery fount and flung the Baba Yaga into it. Didn't it soon make an end of her? After this, Katoma married the merchant's daughter, and the three companions went to the kingdom of Anna the Fair in order to rescue Prince Ivan. When they drew near to the capital, what should they see but Prince Ivan driving a herd of cows? "Stop, herdsman," says Katoma. "Where are you driving these cows?" "I'm driving them to the princess's courtyard," replied the prince. "The princess always sees for herself whether all the cows are there. Here, herdsman, take my clothes and put them on, and I will put on yours and drive the cows." "No, brother, that cannot be done. If the princess found it out, I should suffer harm." "Never fear, nothing will happen. Katoma will guarantee you that." Prince Ivan sighed and said, "Oh, good man, if Katoma had been alive, I should not have been feeding these cows afield." And then Katoma disclosed to him who he was. Prince Ivan warmly embraced him and burst into tears. "I never hoped to even see you again," said he. And so they exchanged clothes. The tutor drove the cows to the princess's courtyard. Anna the Fair went into the balcony and looked to see if all the cows were there, and ordered them to be driven into the sheds. All the cows went into the sheds except the last one, which remained at the gate. Katoma sprang at it, exclaiming, "What are you waiting for, dog's meat?" Then he seized it by the tail, and he pulled it so hard he pulled the cow's hide right off. Tell me at any point in the last 20 minutes you've had any idea what I was going to say next. The princess saw this and cried with a loud voice, "What is that brute of a cowherd doing? Seize him! Bring him to me!" And then the servants seized Katoma, dragged him to the palace. He went with them, making no excuses, relying on himself. They brought him to the princess. He looked at him and asked, "Who are you? Where do you come from?" "I am he whose feet you cut off, whom you set on a stump. My name is Katoma Diadka, Okin Shapka." "Well," thinks the princess, "now that he's got his feet back again, I must act straightforwardly for him in the future." And she began to beseech him and the prince to pardon him, and she confessed all her sins and swore an oath to always love Prince Ivan and to obey him in all things. And Prince Ivan forgave her and began to live with her in peace and concord. The hero who had been blind remained with them, but Katoma and his wife went to the house of her father, the rich merchant, and took up their abode under his roof. Now that's the end of the story. Where do you even begin? What was that? First of all, the prince deserves nothing. He did nothing himself, complained about everything, and failed at every test he was given. That's number one. Number two, the man who did do all of this also is apparently a terrible person, because as other people in the chat have shown, he breaks his word, he's cruel, he kidnapped a girl who did nothing wrong, and then forces her to marry him. The princess, the whatever her name, the fair, is just a cruel sadist who doesn't want to help anybody, and clearly never loved this prince in any way. Just out of fear begs for her life, and that's enough for them to put together whatever. I mean, it takes a lot for me to feel some sympathy for the Baba Yaga who is sucking milk out of some innocent woman's breast. But I ultimately did. I felt bad for her, that just the worst people in the world. Janera says everyone sucks here. Everyone sucks in this story. Everyone. If the end of the story was that they all killed each other Hamlet style, that would have been the happiest ending. Yeah, except the kidnapped girl. And then she can go, like, why does his merchant father just, like, accept him? Oh, hey, thanks for bringing my daughter back. Yeah, live with me. Tammy says, thank you so very much for the interesting stories, Rory. My favorite part was your Baba Yaga voice. Oh, thank you. It was great. Hope everyone was a wonderful night and sweet dreams all. Yeah, take care, Tammy. GS says, I think the trophy may go to this one. I struggle to think of one that is just as off the wall and insane as this. Like, it goes along sort of like a normal tale, but it lacks in so many key features. It lacks in so many key features. Like, the prince at some point should feel like, you should feel like the prince deserves more than he gets. Right, to be rooting for him. But why would I? Like, his whole angle is just that he won't do any work himself. Janera says, and they all lived miserably ever after. They sure did. Just didn't. I know that Russia has a reputation for being like a hard living, right? You know, tough people that in tough conditions and whatever. And I don't know if that's what's informing this or whether it's this specific collection is just very biased to collect these kind of tales. But my God, what was that? Well, there you go. You can spend the next week trying to parse whatever the hell the blind man and the cripple was. I will be back next Tuesday, unless I'm not. And the only reason I'm saying that is because there is a chance, because I've got to go to a destination wedding in between then, that I will just be too tired. So we will see how it goes. But beyond that, thank you everybody who came and hung out with me. I hope you guys enjoyed the truly insane stories about the Baba Yaga tonight, and I hope you learned a little bit more about the Baba Yaga and her representation in Russian folklore. As for me, I am thankful for Lizzie Rose, Tammy Morelli, GS Genera, Jum Store for dropping in, Uncle Kitty for dropping in, and I will keep the fire going. You folks have yourself a good sleep.